In 2010, Oklahoma voters made Mary Fallin the first female governor in state's history. Just this past November, she was successfully reelected for another 4 years. We are on the heels of her State of the State address that will take place tomorrow, Monday at noon. Well, what do the next 4 years look like for the state of Oklahoma? What does Mary Fallin bring to the office from her previous experience? What is family life like for the governor? And what does she hope to see Oklahoma accomplish? Well, that's what we're talking about this week on the Middle Ground. Here's a look at our one-on-one session with Governor Mary Fallin. Well, good morning, Governor Fallin. Thank you so much for sitting down with us this morning.
Glad to be here with you.
We'd like to start by talking, before we discuss the future and what your plans are for the state, by taking a step back and talking a little bit about your family and what life is like for the governor. Would you tell us a little about your family?
Well, absolutely. Well, I have 2 children, a daughter that's 27, a son that's 24, and then my husband has 4 children between the age of 21 to 33. And so we have a very busy lifestyle, 6 children between the two of us. We call ourselves the Brady Bunch. So we're just like every other family. You know, we're busy with our kids' activities. They're over a lot during the week. We have a lot of family dinners, a lot of family events, and we're very fortunate to have a very close-knit family, which makes it a lot of fun.
Describe your life before running for office. I mean, you've been serving the state of Oklahoma and the public, even at the federal level, for several years. What was life like before you got in public service?
Well, actually, Michael, I've been in office for almost 25 years now, but I started out in my 30s as a young mother, and I was working as a regional director for a national hotel chain over all their operations for the state of Oklahoma, and I'd been in the hotel management business for about 10 years prior to running for public office in my 30s. I had all responsibility for profit loss, sales, marketing, hiring, firing, workers' comp, health insurance, all the things you would have when you run a small business, and was successful at it. I'd actually had been awarded the national manager over the nation, over all the properties that we had, so I was very proud of that. So I had a little bit of business acumen in the private sector. And then I actually got frustrated with what was going on here at the Capitol in my 30s and decided I was going to run for office as a young mother. And prior to all that, my dad had been the mayor of Tecumseh when I was growing up, and then he passed away in my late 20s, and my mother became the mayor of Tecumseh, so I'd learned a lot about public service and how a person can make a difference on a small scale. And so when I was in my 30s and a young mother and had been a businesswoman, I decided that when a legislative seat came open, if I ran for office, I felt like I could work on things that would really improve Oklahoma, whether it was education, whether it was making Oklahoma more business friendly, because I'd been in the business sector, or whether it's just working on eliminating wasteful spending in government or right-sizing government, some of the same principles I'd practiced out in the private sector.
We get that question all the time about how can I make a difference and could I ever run for office from some of our viewers. So help our viewers understand what it's like to make that decision and take that step.
Well, you know, I will tell you that serving in public office is a wonderful opportunity. It's not an easy job because you have lots of hard decisions that you have to make. I work pretty long hours, but I think it's one of the most rewarding jobs that you could ever have because you're actually able to deal with problems that people face in their lives, and that's very rewarding for me personally. If I can make the business climate more business friendly, then I think that's very rewarding. If I can help improve education outcomes, education standards for all of our children, not only my children, but all the children, that's important to me. I've always been a fiscal conservative, and I've always had to practice what I preach and trying to save money and spend money wisely. So if I can do that in state government, that's important to me. So those things can be very rewarding. It can be frustrating. It can be hard. There's certainly sacrifices that a person makes and their family makes. But I think public service is something everyone should do in some realm, whether it's running for office, whether it's volunteering on a charity, a board, or just serving in some way in their community. I think it's our civic responsibility as good citizens of our state.
So how does that 25 years ago, first getting involved, how does that compare to just last November, a successful re-election for another term as governor of Oklahoma? Are there any similarities in those experiences?
There are huge differences between when I ran back in 1990 and was elected versus 2015. It's just a lot of differences. First of all, how politics worked back in the early 1990 in the late 80s compared to this modern century. We didn't have email, we didn't have internet, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Twitter, we didn't have 24-hour news, news cycles, and I'm really dating myself as I tell my children, but it's made how you do politics differently. Today's world, it's a lot easier for people to organize grassroots for or against an issue. It's easier for people to communicate to their elected officials in a heartbeat. It's also a little bit more challenging for an elected official who's trying to make a deliberative decision and gather information in a timely, wise manner when you have lots of people pushing and pulling in different ways because of the internet and how fast they can communicate to you. But it's also a great way to get lots of input.
So we'll talk in a minute about your agenda for this coming year and what you hope to accomplish and that the state will accomplish. But I'd like to ask you first, when you're not serving the state, which just seems like a full-time job and a half, I'm sure, what do you like to do? What does the governor do with her family?
Well, I'm just a regular mom, in the meantime, but I like to spend time with my family. I try to go to as many of my children's events as possible, certainly go to my husband's events. We like to have a lot of family dinners. It's very typical for us to have a big Sunday morning breakfast or a Saturday morning breakfast. My husband and I like to cook a lot of Sunday night dinners with our children. We go to the lake when we can during the summertime with our children, especially the 4th of July or things like that. But we're a pretty typical family in the meantime. We have dogs we enjoy spending time with and just mainly being with our family.
So you talked earlier about the decision to run for office and what led you to public service. Was there any advice that you received either 20-some years ago or here just before this past re-election that's helped, or any advice you could share with our viewers?
One piece of advice I received years ago when I was a very young mother and a young legislator was that I can remember one of the older legislators telling me, do what you think's best. Don't worry about what other people say or think about you. Do what you know's best for the people and for the state of Oklahoma, and the people of Oklahoma will appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Governor Fallin. Folks, stick around. We're going to talk about the next 4 years for the state of Oklahoma and the governor's agenda right after this.